Morning or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from today, and welcome on the Money Tech Buying Frameworks. I'm Siobhan Bonita. I'm a former senior civil servant here in the UK, and I'm delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of the Publishing House Global Government Forum and also our knowledge partner today, IBM. Now, in terms of today's content, so off the shelf and on the money, tech buying frameworks, over the last few years, officials around the world have started to develop and use buying frameworks to help them purchase the technology services and solutions that they need. And these frameworks can have benefits for the buyers and the suppliers, cutting costs of administration, improving compliance with pre-approval requirements, and realising economies of scale by allowing smaller civil service bodies who may not have such advanced digital capacity to work together to buy what they need. What's more, as governments move towards platform services and cloud computing, civil servants are able to integrate governing tech such as APIs and data formats into the frameworks, meaning that solutions will work across government departments. And as technology evolves and as governments look to removing barriers for SMEs and other potential suppliers, it's probably fair to say that tech buying frameworks look set to grow over the coming years. But that's not to mean that they aren't without their challenges. And our expert panel today will discuss all of these issues and more. And in a moment, I will introduce our fantastic panel, but there'll also be an opportunity for you, our audience, to put your questions to our panel. So whichever device you are using, you should see there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. Please use that Q&A function at any time from now on to message in your questions. And once we've heard from our panel, we get through as many of your audience questions as we possibly can. So without further ado, let me introduce our fantastic panel. First, we will hear from Sal Udin, who is the Commercial Director for Technology Solutions and Outcomes at the Crown Commercial Service in the United Kingdom. Before joining the Crown Commercial Service, Sal was the Interim Commercial Director at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in the UK. Sal has a track record of problem solving and working with senior stakeholders and suppliers in both the private and public sector, with particular expertise in maximising the value that buyers can obtain from contracts over their full lifetime. Then we will hear from Rotem Einav, who is from the Digital National Bureau in Israel. Rotem manages digital products related to human capital in the public sector. She designed and launched, together with the Government Procurement Administration, the Digital Services Tender in Israel, which enables the government to purchase services in a wide range of digital expertise. And we're going to hear more about that in her presentation. And prior to entering the civil service, Rotem worked at several startups and digital organisations. Then we will hear from Christina Kabale, who is the Executive Director for our knowledge partner IBM, their global public sector division. Christina has led large transformational projects with different central and local government clients in a huge range of countries, so Germany, France, the UK, the United States, Italy, Finland, Greece and Israel as well. So that will be interesting in terms of the presentations. And she has contributed to the development of many advanced tech buying frameworks for governments across the globe. And then last, but by no means least, we head over to Canada, where we'll hear from Elodie Buneau, who is Director of Platform at the Canadian Digital Service. The Digital Service partners with government departments to improve how they deliver digital services to people in Canada. And Elodie, before she joined the government, Elodie was focused on helping traditional industries such as publishing, medical and hospitality to transition into modern, digitally empowered organisations. So I'm sure you will agree we have a really stellar panel with us today. As I said, please do use this opportunity to message in your questions, because it's a really good chance for you to ask any questions that you might have about today's topic. But now I'm going to invite Sal to give us the first presentation. Over to you, Sal.
Thanks, Siobhan, and I hope everyone can hear me okay. Thank you. So, look, firstly, thank you for having me on today. I have to say, if I was going to ask the Global Government Forum to come up with a topic that would suit me, don't think I could come up with a better topic myself. So thank you for that. I did have a think about in my just over 5 minutes time that I have with you, what kind of points I wanted to get across. And I was thinking, a couple of points, but like London buses, quite a few points came together. So I'm going to cover around 8 to 10 points. Let's see where we go. And the reason I added a few more points is I wanted to make sure I cover what I call the triangle of being a buying organization and having to look after customers and suppliers. So let's see how we get on. And Siobhan, please do keep me to time. Alexa, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So my first point that I wanted to make is to be successful in being a buying organization and helping our suppliers and customers, you've got to understand the backdrop. So I pulled this slide together, which explains at a very high level the kind of backdrop that the UK government is dealing with at the moment. I won't go through every point, but essentially, whether it's levelling up, investing in our National Health Service, looking at economic growth after the pandemic, or sustainability, whatever the point is, we have to look at the suite of initiatives and make sure our agreements help the customers deliver. There's a couple of points on the right-hand side that I think are relevant, which is we've got to make sure within those agreements, key points like carbon net zero are taken into account. I'll explain why this is relevant as we go on, but another key point is my second point. If we can go to the next slide, Alexa. This is about understanding the customer centricity. So public sector organizations have much diversity in the UK government, and I'm sure it's the same for other governments around the world. And I thought I'd point to a couple of metrics here in that around £19 billion is spent on technology in the UK government. I'm actually quite proud to say that Crown Commercial Service, which is my organisation, penetrates around 72% of the central government market. But you can see where our homework is still. Whilst we're capturing 21%, there's much more we can do. So it just goes to show that there's a lot of diversity in organisations that we serve. I think another thing is making sure we have one eye on the fact that the supplier is a customer, and we've got to make our agreements attractive to them and attractive not just the large organizations and companies, but also small and medium-sized enterprises. My point 4 is around plugging what I call the relevance gap. We've got to make sure we are properly connecting the demand signal with the supply signal. So that's always on my mind and my team and organization's mind. It's worth mentioning here that what's worked before in the past may not actually be relevant now, but there's a flip side to that. If something is working, then you ride that wave for as long as you can. So a good example for us is our digital platform, and the what we call the G Cloud has worked really well, and that's been going full force for over a decade. Other agreements, fall by the wayside, and then you've got to find a way of refreshing those. If we go to the next slide, my next point is about keeping a balanced set of product and service. And so what we try to do is follow what we call the agreement cycle, and that goes from coming up with the category strategies that feed in to what the agreement should look like, actually the mechanics and operation of generating the agreement, then watering and feeding the agreement, which we call the operate phase, and then really working on marketing and growing that agreement. That cycle keeps us on our toes. If you just go to the next slide, hopefully you can see that slide, which is the category strategies. We try to touch on every and all category within tech, just to call out a few, the enterprise applications in the software market, or whether it's contact centers, all the way over to artificial intelligence. So that category strategy that we pull together is a real heartbeat of producing an agreement. Just go to the next slide. I also like to keep a close eye on the organization understanding what the live agreements are, and therefore so our customer organizations understand those live agreements. And then on the next slide, I try to point out, what our pipeline thinking is, and get the people to start preparing for that, for the fact that these are the agreements that will be coming out to the market soon. So if you're a supplier, get ready, and if you're a customer, start understanding your future pipeline and is there a match there. Of course, we get feedback all the time, and I'll come to that point in a second. The next point I wanted to touch on then is a point that the next 2 points are about capability and capacity. I'm sure every organization has to go through that analysis, but if you don't have the right capability, we're not afraid to bring in experts from the partner organizations in the private sector. And why not? I did a little bit of that when I brought in some cyber expertise. And also capacity. There's not going to be there will be times where your capacity is not enough, and can you get some help from either other organizations or, again, support from private sector partners. It'd be remiss of me not to mention the SWOT analysis point. I think a good buying organization keeps an eye on its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and a little cheeky look at what other buying organizations are doing, and I'm sure they do it vice versa. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think it keeps each other on our toes. Last couple of points then. So I mentioned the feedback loop. I think it's really important that suppliers are heard as well as customers. That rich insight into thoughts, feelings, requirements is really important, and we really work hard to try to get that. It feeds into our agreements. But my final slide then is probably the slide that I leave you on with some thoughts. I think the biggest point that's on my mind is around the balancing act for continuous improvement. If you look at the middle piece of this, which is around keeping your platform a good, solid, workable, cutting-edge platform as much as possible, I think we have a really good platform. Can it be better? Can it be more what people term Amazon-esque? Probably. There's always things that can be improved. But so long as it's simple, stable, flexible, equitable, they're the kind of things we want to keep an eye on. And then we've got to find a balance between buyers' needs and wants and suppliers' need and wants. I won't cover everyone, but buyers, for example, they depend on our agreements being regulatory compliant. Suppliers want to be able to have a meaningful level playing field and feel like that's open and fair, and an efficient and unburdened way of bidding in terms of cost and the bidding process. But you can see there's some other points there as well. So they were my points that I think about when it comes to tech agreements and helping civil servants and other public sector bodies as well. And I hope that gives a good insight into what a buying organization thinks about. And I hope Siobhan hits the brief of off the shelf and on the money.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sal. It's a really great way to kick off this webinar with that presentation, because I think you've covered so many things there that the audience and maybe some of our other panel members, we can unpick as we go through. Just for people, audience members who may not be familiar with the term levelling up in the UK, because you set that out in the beginning, that's in the UK, there's a real push from our government to make sure that investment is spread equally across the country. So in the north, in the southwest, so not just, there's a sense that maybe it's been in the southeast up until now. Really like what you said there about the scale, Sal, why this is so important. 19 billion pounds worth goes through kind of central government and wider public sector procurement. So that's a huge amount of money, and it needs to be spent wisely and efficiently. And then just really interesting to hear how you position yourself, like you need to be aware of the requirements of the suppliers and the buyers, and kind of bringing those two together in a way that works for everybody. And finally, really leaving us with that message that things can always be improved. So the need, and I think our audience will connect with that, the need to be constantly looking at updating and keeping these frameworks relevant and up to date. So a really great way to kick off. Thank you so much, Sal. And now I'm going to ask Rotem to give us her thoughts.
Hi, thank you. I'm Rotem. I'm a product manager at Digital Israel. Today I want to share with you a product that we built, the Digital Services Tender, that we just built it in a way we built a government service in a design thinking way, in a way that we just like Sal said, taking the needs of the suppliers and the needs of the civil service and just merge it together and understand the whole image, the whole picture. So Alexa, please, if you can go on. The problem, as you know, and also the last webinar of this forum just discussed a bit this professionals problem. In the civil service, there are not, in Israel, there are not enough persons that just professional in those areas, user experience, UX and UI, data, processes. We had a little bit tech, buying them in outsource, people that are working on the civil service. And the product management, it's also something that is not so, the government offices are not so familiar with this method, with this person. So this is the big problem. So we have some solutions. Digital Academy is one project that we built, as well as many countries that are working on their Digital Academy and countries that already have some. And we want to achieve a solution that can help government buy digital professionals projects in many expertise. So we want it in outputs and not like buying person, just a project that have some outputs in that you buy, and this is the project. And we also want to have a platform in which the government offices will use when they need to publish a tender or a bid, a request. And also we want to make it to help small and medium suppliers to be part of this system. Okay, so this was the goals that we want to achieve. Alexa, if you can go one more, thanks. So we just try to learn about the market in Israel, and we publish a request for information, an RFI, and we've done user research with offices and suppliers. And then we designed a central tender that can just merge between the needs of the offices and the market expertise. And we also lowering some bureaucracy requirements. For example, insurance and guarantee that government ask in the tenders. Here we just lower it, so small and medium business can just be part of this group of suppliers. And we also define two arenas, small and big. This is arenas that the future projects that will be launched via this tender will be just one of these two groups. The expertise are in two tenders, in digital services and tech services. In the digital, we have data, CX, UX, and UI, or the user experience world, content and digital marketing, business process changing, and product management. In the tech, we have open code development, technology innovation, system analysis, and cloud migration. Alexa, you can go one more. In high level, the working with the tender, After we had the big tender, we have list of suppliers. And when office wants to use this tender, he needs to publish a bid request, okay, or competition request. And some of the supplier in the list will be taken out and be able to offer their quote. So when office need a solution, he should define the project by writing brief, and we have template of how they need to write the brief. Then the list of suppliers they taking out from the list in a equity way. It's with the number of the opportunities they had in the past. So the system doing this. And then they need to register the pricing quote. The system choose the supplier if it's only with a price, or if it's in also with quality. And then kicking off, they'll also define the contrast, one contrast for all over the projects. So it's really simple and very a good start for a digital project. If we can go one more, Alexa. In a way of the outcomes, we see wider geographic range of digital suppliers that working with the Israeli government. This is the Israel map, and you can see before the tender only few suppliers, and after also from a wide range, not only from Tel Aviv. 160 suppliers chosen to participate out of 360 that try to be part of this tender. 90% of them are new in government. They didn't able to work with the government before. Okay, it's a boutique suppliers that's very good in their digital expertise, and they can give really benefits to our government. And 50% of them are freelance. So in terms of what we want to achieve, really, we really get it done. Alexa, one more, please. I brought some examples or case studies of a project that you can just read it and understand the usage that the Israeli government are really done with this tender. So this is just examples of a project that's already been done. Another slide. I really want to show you the platform, but it will take me more than a few minutes. And also the platform is in Hebrew and didn't support English. And when I use the Google Translate, it's really funny because, you know, a request or a bidding request is a face, because in Hebrew there are not so many words, and the same word of face are the same word of a request. But I want to show this, and this is my last one. You can see all the workflow of the request, the opening one, and then a schedule for the questions part, and then for getting the request, the quotes of suppliers, the suggestions box, and you see everything is digital. Okay, they are not a physical box. They need to put their quotes. So I have a full system that if one of them want to see, I can do it in a different meeting. Alexa, one more. That's it. So
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rita. I mean, it's really good to go from Sal giving that kind of, I think, overall picture of all the stuff to actually see one of the processes in a bit more detail. And as you said, they're setting it in that bigger challenge, I think, of the kind of the need to bridge digital skills gap in the civil service as one of your objectives, whilst also helping to drive up inclusivity. And really impressive that 90% of the contracts awarded were for new new suppliers and that real focus on small and medium suppliers in particular. So really good to see the actual tender, and a shame that we couldn't get it in English, but we didn't want to have it lost in translation there. So thank you so much, Rotem, for your presentation. I'm now going to invite Christina to give us hers.
Thank you, Siobhan, and thanks, Rotem and Sal, very good opening presentations. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this panel today. So my name is Cristina Cavallé. I work as Executive Director for IBM Public Sector at global level. So it is a real pleasure for me to see today this great audience from all over the world. And following the opening comments, I would like to share from my side some highlights of a study that we have been conducting recently at IBM, which kind of recaps on all what has happened in the world during the global pandemic and what have been the key challenges for government leaders and what are the continuing implications of these challenges into the future. So, and I would like just to share with you some highlights of that, because I think it's very important, because it will shape how we will design the tech buying frameworks of the future. So basically, the IBM government team has been very busy in the last year and a half, and has become quite essential in providing support to our clients throughout the global pandemic. We have done some amazing work together, which has given us the opportunity to reflect on how we can improve, so how the world has changed and what we need to do to better serve these challenges of government leaders across the world. Alexa, if you can move one chart. Okay, so basically in our study, we have taken a stock of the lessons captured during the pandemic. And with the intent of ensuring that these lessons are not only captured, but are also lessons learned, and that our clients, our government leaders will emerge stronger and more resilient out of this period of crisis. The ultimate intent is that in the event that another emergency situation comes, governments will be better prepared to engage with citizens and to better serve citizens. So first, we discussed with the leaders across the world and reflected on these key challenges that we faced during the pandemic. And I am not going to spend a lot of time on this, because we all know it, we all lived it, so we are quite aware of the challenges we face. But let me just summarize that governments face 5 key challenges, as you can see here in the chart. And the first one was basically an exploding demand for services. And here I lived in person one example with the unemployment website of Australia government, where we had 100,000 people concurrently accessing the website on a Monday morning at 9 a.m. So it was really hard. And it just was one example of many that were happening in many countries at the same time. And that was just giving us the scale of what was going on, and how we needed also to accelerate the digital transformation of many processes across governments, so that we could cope with this exploding demand for services. The second key challenge that I would like to highlight is the shift in the fiscal priorities, a shift in debt. So globally, governments spend approximately $20 trillion that we do not have. So if we think about it, 20 trillion is the size of the GDP of the United States. So just to have an idea of the scale, and the United States is the leading economy of the world, at least for now. So it's absolutely huge, the volume of debt that was raised, completely unprecedented. And now we've got to figure out how we will deal with that debt. And that's an efficiency and a cost takeout issue. Another key challenge, and that's really something that's here to stay, is that along the way, governments had to adapt, and the workforce had to adapt as well, with more agility and flexibility that implied in many cases more automation, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, intelligent workflows and systems. So all this came in many countries, came kind of a sudden, came accelerated. So, and it was let's say that we were caught off by surprise, and we also saw that some governments were very intelligently accelerating this process of transforming the workforce. The result of all what happened is that there is a remarkable loss of trust in the society towards governments, and this trust will need to be recovered. So there are many studies from different independent sources showing that in many cases the citizen experience towards the government was not what they expected. So there is a lot of room for improvement yet in many countries, while other countries are, of course, leading the pack. If we move to the next chart, Alexa, please. Okay, so here I just wanted to say that as we were helping our government clients, 4 critical themes emerged during the pandemic. The first one is this rapid need for innovation and agility, and thus an increased focus on the tech buying frameworks to drive speed. So we were all very surprised to see how many governments quickly shifted to high gear and accelerated digital transformation. But as I said, still a lot to do. And now the key is how we maintain and sustain that in rapid innovation while putting a bit more control on top of that. Because we did a lot of good things, but we did those things in the heat of the moment. And we might need now to go back and take a look to those rapid innovations that came up during the pandemic, but we need to make sure that we have the right level of governance, control, and security. And the tech buying frameworks should help us put more structure and standardization into the tech projects and ensure that we regain this level of control. The second key theme that was critical was the need for this increased transparency and trust. So getting to this frictionless citizen experience, because some citizens were interacting with their government more in a couple of months than they had ever in their whole life. And this was an opportunity, but it was also, in some cases, an experience that citizens expressed that they were not used to. Some of them felt their expectations were met, others were frustrated because the whole situation was an emergency, and it was difficult to get a grasp on what was going on. So we need, overall, if we look at what has happened, we need to regain citizen trust by getting the right service across all points of contact with the citizen, and this is very much linked with having the right data foundation for increased citizen care. The third key theme, security, is not a question. So we need to strengthen security because many breaches happened during the last months. So we need to go back and revisit all these rapid decisions, but that we need to ensure this zero trust security policy. And then the fourth key theme, the need for talent transformation, upskilling, reskilling the task force to be better equipped for what's coming. If we move to the next chart, Alexa, please. So we took these critical themes and we broke them into 7 implications for governments moving forward into the future. The first one is emergency preparedness, and you will all agree with me that this has become a top priority in the mind of all governments. Second is finding the right balance between business innovation, agility, governance, and control. And I think this links back also to what Sal was showing us a little bit earlier today. New citizen engagement models, urgency in modernizing supply chains in public sector, the robust analytic foundation that will establish the level of trust with citizens, security, and the adaptive learning programs. If we look at the 7 implications, all lead to a deep transformation on how governments provide services to citizens by injecting innovation and agility to modernize applications and procurement processes, with a workforce of public servants prepared for the digital world. So if we take these 7 implications as our design principles, what we did is we define a tech buying framework for our clients that relies on the key building blocks to help accelerate the digital transformation journey. And if we look at the next page, Alexa, we have here an example of one tech buying framework that we built for a government. Here, what I would stress is that we not only linked to all these design principles that came from our study, but we were making sure that each of the building blocks of the tech buying framework is secure, automated, and ensures the right connectivity so that governments have this solid foundation that can be extended with more complex services. We also wrap the framework with compliance with all the key standards so that we could have a fast, efficient, and easy to use compliant procurement framework to remove the need to undertake the costly and time-consuming full procurement processes. Some examples of it are also included in the next page. If you would like to move one more, Alexa. Okay. And then apart from all the compliance at different levels and how the tech buying framework helped to establish this standardization, I would add that what we put on top of the framework, which is quite new compared to what we had in the past, is we had like what we call personas roadmaps. So depending on the buyer persona, so which level was the buyer and which kind of solution was buying, we were providing templates to facilitate the process. And there is an example, I think, in the next chart on cloud. So on different governments around the world, in Australia, Canada, US, and then other countries in Europe, how they were procuring cloud, hybrid cloud, which, as you know, is like the kind of enabler to accelerate all this digital transformation happening all over the place. And here I just wrote some examples.
I'm just gonna give you a heads up on timing, because I know you've got
yes. So this is just an example, so I will leave it in case there are questions. And now, since we have Elodie also from Canada, she can also provide some examples on this. So that was a little bit of wrap up on what we've been doing until now, and we can go deeper in the questions. Thank you, Siobhan.
Thanks so much, Christina. And I'm sure we'll come back to that in questions because you provided so much information there. And just to the audience, before we go to Elodie, please do start sending in your questions, because we've had so much information there. But really good to hear all those examples, Christina. Great to see the work that IBM did during the pandemic, and how that's, in the context of tech frameworks, then how they've been used to respond to the urgent kind of issues, but also now how they need to kind of evolve and be tweaked to make sure that we can meet those future challenges and get some of those checks and balances back into the system as well that are really important. So thank you so much for that. Elodie, I'm going to come over to you now.
Thank you, Siobhan. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing okay with the winter starting. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. I thought maybe today I would start with a personal story. So when I was really little, my dad started a company. He started a startup, and the software that they were building were to facilitate RFPs and procurements in France, because I grew up in France and now I'm over in Canada. And so they started from like zero, literally like garage type software company way back. And they grew. And so for the first years of my life where I was at home, I would hear about this like every day, like how difficult RFPs and procurements were. And then the company was sold, and then I moved on to doing my own things in tech. And then last year, I was brought back into government in Canada. And I realized all the things I was hearing and, listening about when I was a little kid were still very real, even if I changed countries and we were 20 years later. So that was quite interesting. So just a little bit about like who I am. So I'm at the Canadian Digital Service in Canada, and I work on providing public servants in Canada with the tools that they need to deliver modern and accessible experiences to the public. We try to make sure that Canadians get the services and the experience that we feel they're entitled to, and especially with this the kind of like dichotomy between like the kind of experiences you get from the public sector compared to the private sector the gap is quite big. And so bridging that gap has been really something we've been focusing on. We really try to focus on what I call the B2B2C experience. So having a good experience for the public servants and for the end user, because they don't go one without the other. So if we can go to the next slide. So why am I here? Next. So I want to talk to you about how to consider buying technology and also evaluating whether you should buy technology at all. Next. So I have 3 pieces of advice. The first one is to think about the problem first, not the solution or the procurement first. And I hope Christina is not going to hate me for saying that. But it's not about buying a whole product suite. It's really about focusing on what your problem is. In product management, we call it jobs to be done. So like, what are you trying to fulfill? Don't try to like put a label on it. Don't try to say, I'm going to buy a DXP, or I'm going to buy God knows what, or I'm going to buy an SSO. Like, look at what you're trying to solve for the public servants and your end users, the public. So identify your problem or problems usually, and then be really clear about the constraints that you have. And that's really, really important. So what do you absolutely need? What do you have to play within? So I'll give you an example. In Canada, we absolutely have to be bilingual because it's both French and English are official languages. And so we have to bake that into anything we use. Depending on where you are, obviously there are other types of policy requirements. Security is obviously really important, data privacy and how it gets applied, as well as accessibility. And by accessibility, I also add inclusivity, which nowadays I think is paramount. So that was number 1. Think about the problem first, not the solution first. Next. The second thing is you got to build agility in your procurement process if you choose to buy. So now that you know kind of what problem you want to solve and what your constraints are, you got to make sure you bake in some buffer, because I mean, I've been there too. We know procurement takes forever. Even if you have really great tech buying frameworks and automations and like things that are helping you get through, it will take some time. And by the end of the process, you still need to make sure what you end up with is going to solve your problems. And the target will move during that time. It just will. Like, take my word for it. It will not be the same context and environment between the moment you start and the moment you end, especially if we include integration and implementation in the endpoint. So make sure you have built in a way to adjust requirements, add or remove items, because you will need to do that. You need to make sure you validate and test what you're getting along the way, because you don't want to get to the end and realize that you don't have at all the right thing. And you also, and I touched on this like just before, don't underestimate the importance of implementation, integration, and migration, because it's great to buy a software or whatever you're going to buy. You got to make sure you're going to like adapt it to what you need. And that's super key. That goes with also Do you have the talent to do that? Do you need to hire externally the talent? So making sure you have a plan for this. And I will also add, because I find this to be a big pet peeve of governments, do not try to customize every single thing under the sun because you're a special flower. Like, there are platform products out there that are made to be like used. You got to adapt your process a little bit to fit within those, because if you start customizing everything in the platform that you're buying, you're going to end up with something that is very hard to update, lots of legacy, and you will not be able to benefit from the new innovations that whichever platform you're on will release. So there is some amount of work to do to actually think about how you change how you work to adapt to what you're buying as well. And then third, if we can go to the next slide, look inward. So we're talking about buying tech here. Just one before, if you can, Alex. Two before now. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, I think we're missing a slide. That's okay. So the number 3 thing that I was going to say is you got to look inward. So making sure that if you choose not to buy, you're able to look at what you can do from within. There are lots of ways that government can actually build really good platforms, especially reusing open source technologies. And we're doing a lot of that as well. And you got to like figure out what's right for you. So let's go next, Alexander. Okay, so I can tell you a bit more about that as well. So you can build platform products from within your government. They really empower you to deliver better and faster because you don't have that runway for procurement. Next. At the Canadian Digital Service, we have a few of those, and there are many more across the government in Canada. But just to tell you what we've been focusing on and trying to develop to support the rest of government, we've been actually reusing some GDS open source code base out in the UK to pick up their notification system, and we've repurposed it for Canada. We're working on web forms, we're working on web publishing and design systems, and that's been actually pretty powerful to integrate with other private sector tools that have been procured and to kind of provide a foundational element. And that's really, whether it's bought or built, it's important to strive for those elements that can be repurposed all across government. So next, so I have to finish. I give you 3 pieces of advice, and now I'm going to have 2 takeaways. So the first one, next, is when you buy, make sure what you buy is fit for purpose and fit for context, so that you are able, through public servants, to deliver good modern experiences to the public. Next. And then the second one is really think about whether you should buy or build. You don't need to buy everything. Sometimes it's as easy or easier to actually build internally platform products so that they are used all across governments. Next, and I think I'm done, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Elodie. It's great to have that bit of challenge there. And before we go to questions, I'm going to come back and ask your fellow panel members about some of the things you've said there. But just to summarize very quickly, so what you said is think about your problem first, don't necessarily buy just for the sake of it, and also be really clear about what your constraints are. And civil servants, I think public servants have particular constraints that they are working in. And even if you do buy something, can you implement it? Do you have the people who know how to implement it and use it, and don't over customize things that you buy, because that will cause you problems in future. And then that whole question, which I want to come back now straight away before we go to questions, I'm going to put this to Sal because we haven't heard from him for a while. So Elodie posed that question there around, should you buy or should you build your own? Do you think there is a tendency, Sal, maybe in the UK, because we've been doing these frameworks now for quite a while in the UK, is there maybe a danger that people now think they have to buy everything, a kind of off-the-shelf product, you know, when they should be building it themselves? What are your thoughts on what Elodie said there?
I think the short answer to whether you should always buy from a framework is no. that there's going to be times where the answer is frankly yes. For example, the more commodity-based a purchase is, I think the more it lends itself to being bought from a framework, and rightly so. You know, a government is well within its rights to not take an organization silo approach. It needs to take an enterprise and system-wide approach and leverage that group spending power across the public sector. And rightly so, you know, it should. It's taxpayer spend. And more often than not, in fact, there's probably very few occasions when this doesn't happen, is you get a better value for money offering when you leverage the group spend. However, there's going to be times where there's some bespoke products, some specialist products, some regulatory issues, some supplier lock-in issues where, you know, just buying from a framework just might not tick all the boxes. And by all means, you know, there's a basket of routes to market, you know, ranging from direct award to, you know, doing an OJU open competition, depending if you're in the EU. If you're outside the EU, I'm sure there's similar types of frameworks. But yeah, I think the answer is it depends on what's being bought, I think. That would be my take on it, Siobhan.
Thanks, Sal. Rotem, we come back to you on this one as well. Do you agree with Elodie that sometimes frameworks aren't the right way to go, or yours has been so successful, I think, in terms of meeting its objectives? For you, is that now the kind of very much the default option?
Actually, we in the digital burner, we just go over any request that publish in the tender. Right now, it's like this. I'm not sure it will continue because it's a lot of work, but right now it's like this. And I see when an office going in a way that he want to build something that already we have as a platform. Okay, for example, we have a platform for building mini sites, and some offices doesn't familiar with this platform, and they want another supplier to build this for them. So it's good that I'm on this point, like a barrier. And we really see this some decision making that they need to do. We saw it in a project with our justice office. They build an ODR, a system of online dispute resolution. And they need to decide if to take a video conference, video like a product like Zoom, or maybe another one, and in terms of you know, security and stuff. So we can offer them to take a supplier that will just learn each option and help them to get the best decision. And after doing a specification if needed, and we can, in our brief to the supplier, we can put an optional service for if it's not a buy, but a build, an optional service that will specificate the solution. If it's a buy, so they need maybe to, you know, to just customize it. But if it's built, so there will be specification level and stuff.
Thanks, Rotem. Christina, I'm going to kick off the first question coming to you. So you can touch on that issue as well of buy or build. But I guess the question is what we didn't hear explicitly in the opening presentations is, to what extent do you think the existence of these buying frameworks has actually led to some real benefits? And what have those benefits been? So whether that's for the kind of buyers in the civil service or whether it's for the suppliers, in your experience, and you've worked with lots of people around the world on this, what have the biggest benefits been?
Well, I think the biggest benefits come from the significant reduction in procurement timescale from 6-9 months to as little as weeks. So where I worked with government clients that have a mature tech buying framework, they can procure in weeks. And I think this is the kind of disruptive approach compared to the long processes that we had been seeing in the past. So I would say the reduction in time and then gaining speed. Yeah. Also, the reduced procurement costs is a benefit, because once you achieve, and here I tend to agree with the comment from Sal, that it depends on what you are buying, and it depends on the phase where you are in your project. So in early phases, usually you need a lot of strategic discussions. But once the agency that is procuring knows what they want, or they have moved on through that phase of definition or design, they are in a more mature phase where they can kind of standardize the kind of components they want to procure. And here is where we can achieve more efficiencies, more cost efficiencies. So that's another benefit. And then I would say the pre-agreed terms and conditions, so that the providers can simply call off the framework to meet requirements. This injects agility, innovation. So this is reducing risks for the government and making things easier for the providers to meet the client need whenever required. For me, these are like the top benefits. So fast, efficient, and reduction in the time frames, cost efficiencies, and having these pre-agreed terms and conditions. Then we could add security, security in the transactions, long-term relationships as well. I think all those are also derived benefits that come along the way.
Thanks, Christina. And just a reminder to the audience, there is no question you can't ask for this panel. So if you're thinking about anything, we've got such an open, willing panel here. Please do put in your questions. Elodie, were there any benefits? So if somebody does decide to buy, because I know you've put the kind of, the challenge in there that maybe that's not always the right way to go, but if it is the right way to go, from your experience, what have you seen in terms of the biggest benefits, both for the officials, but also for the suppliers?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if done well, you can really leapfrog innovation. And that's a huge benefit. I don't know how it's going in other parts of the world, but acquiring talent within government, especially tech talent, is incredibly challenging, because the rates that we can afford/pay, because I don't know about everywhere else, but we're unionized, and therefore we don't have the freedom to choose, makes it very difficult to be competitive with the private sector. And therefore, sometimes you actually do need that talent. And if the only way to get it is through buying a tool, then that's also a very viable option. I think it's the mix is really what's, I think, important, because used properly, you can really propel like the feature set that you can empower public servants with. And obviously also kind of plug the gap of like talent acquisition. And I'm not even going to talk about retention nowadays in tech, but yeah, I'm sure we're all facing those challenges.
That's a whole nother webinar, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Rotem, you were nodding in agreement there. And obviously one of the biggest successes for you, the biggest benefits, has been that inclusion of kind of new suppliers. What were the barriers before, and why has this been so successful, do you think? Was it in the way you designed the new system, or is it the final system itself, or both of those things?
Actually, the guarantee is something that the government asks from each supplier to guarantee 5% of the project budget, up to 5%, and it could be really hard for a small supplier to add it to the project, and also it will lower the price or the benefits that the office will get because of this part of the supplier budget. The all projects are on fixed price. So this is one, and the insurance. We ask the company that working with our treasury office to and do all the insurance of the government to lower their needs, and it's only the regular insurance that have in the market. This is the sentence, and not something special. Because also we didn't want the small medium suppliers need to buy another insurance policies to be able to take part. Only a project above 1 million new Israeli shekel need a special insurance. Under 1 million doesn't need any special insurance.
Okay, thanks, Rotem. Sal, you started your presentation by saying this was very much your specialist subject. So have there been any unexpected benefits for you over and above maybe what you've already heard from your fellow panel members there? And you've been working on these things now for quite a few years in the UK.
I think unexpected benefits, I'll have a think about, but in terms of the amount of expected benefits that's come as a surprise is just the amount of money that can be saved from doing system-wide deals. For example, with a said global software vendor, when government operates as one, you can develop a world-class deal quite easily. But if you have a siloed approach, that's just never going to happen. I would like to touch on the make versus buy. Let's not kid ourselves as to why the buy option is such a regular option. It's just because we've hollowed out our capability in governments to deliver services in the main in-house. So we rely on outsource providers. I do think there's something in actually taking a more make approach versus the buy approach, but that comes with its own risks and investment and return on investment timescales, which frankly, the cycle of government changes, there's often not enough patience for. So I guess each country has to look at its different dynamics as to what the decision-making process is. I fear that value now trumps whole life value later, which may be more, but the investment now is not a vote seller, I'd say.
It's interesting. I can see all of your panel members nodding in agreement at what you're saying. And Elodie, you started your presentation with your personal story about growing up in France and how those challenges are still there in Canada, though that many years later. And I guess part of these webinars is to share those kind of experiences across different countries. And it looks like civil servants everywhere are dealing with similar challenges. You all mentioned how fast, like the importance of pace and how fast things are moving as well. And I'm just curious, my next question is, where do you see, if you look ahead to the future, where do you see kind of tech frameworks evolving? What do you think the next kind of generation of tech frameworks are going to look like? Christina, I'm going to come to you first for your thoughts on this one.
Okay, so I would say, and here maybe I'm recovering one of the charts that I have in the backup, because what I see for the future is more collaboration, more ecosystems. So we touched on it before, having small and large players all being able to participate and to provide subject matter experts and to be certified to be part of this network. And I believe that technology can also play a role and facilitate for governments to have trusted suppliers, no matter what is their size, into this network, because we have been discussing a lot on how technologies like blockchain or digital identities can be like plugged into the existing tech buying frameworks so that providers can be trusted because they their credentials, their identity, or their capabilities can be validated by external trusted data sources. And this is something that I think it's the future, but it's already here. So there are already some clients like testing this kind of networks, and I believe it's of vital importance from the collaborative perspective. Like in this very competitive world, it's very difficult to keep pace with the amount of change, as you were saying. So we need like to partner. Then you have governments that want to learn from the experiences of governments in other countries, and there is more and more collaboration and competition and networks. So I think that this will be the next big step. So trying to streamline and to simplify supplier qualification, onboarding, life cycle management with this kind of technologies.
Thanks, Christina. Rotem, are you thinking of your next generation of kind of platform yet? And does what Christina says there, does that resonate with you? Are you thinking of that kind of technology?
Actually, we need to publish the tender again, the central tender, because we need more suppliers and in the existing expertise, and we need another expertise. For example, we have copy, but we doesn't have micro copy, and it's something that we need. So we need to keep working on it, and also we try to deal with this like in a customer success way, and we doesn't have a customer success right now, and we need to hire one and put him on the not in Digital Israel, but in the governmental procurement. And he will deal with all the system and try to learn from the quotes and from the project and do all the cycle. We also have a way that we can just take tell the vendor how was the experience, and for every 5 projects that the vendor or the supplier work on, he can have another grade that will affect his opportunities later on. So we really need to work on it because there are until now there are 200 requests, something like this, in the tender. And in this month, by the end of each year, it's really there are many requests in the air. So we need someone to just deal with it and with the feedback and stuff. This is our challenge.
Thanks, Rotem. Elodie, what's coming next in Canada? Where do you see this going?
I think as Christina was saying, it needs, the pace is critical. And so getting to a point where pace can be fastened, and also to Rotem's point, having both large and small providers included in that chain, so that there are better options across the board for governments.
Exactly. Sal, whenever people talk about digital IDs, not just lead blockchain style, but digital IDs as kind of a way to going forward, I always think countries fall into 2 camps: people that are already doing kind of digital IDs and people that aren't. And I think the UK is probably in the category where we aren't yet doing that. So do you see that as a challenge going forward? Because is that almost inevitable that we're going to have to end up going down that route?
I can definitely see a almost forced path that we have to go down. It's all about keeping up with the trends. I think technology can be a friend and a foe in the amount of automation, technology coming up the curve. The cost of it starts to then be interesting, and then the risks of ceding control, I guess, to platforms is something that probably makes a more conservative approach easier to accept, and that's probably what's held back taking up full advantage of technical innovation. Having said that, though, I do think the backdrop of the economy is probably going to push, especially building back after the pandemic, is probably going to force the issue a bit more around, digital IDs and what can we do to reduce, because with digital comes reduced costs, but with digital comes reduced increased risk. So it's that balance, I think, is worth a thought. Good question, though. I think something I'd probably go away and reflect on.
Thanks, Al. Well, just to say, we're running out of time, I'm afraid. The conversation has gone so quickly. This will be the final question. But also, I just want to say to the audience, a survey email has gone out. It will be in your inboxes. Just if you could take a couple of minutes to fill that in, we'd be hugely grateful. It just means we can give you exactly the type of webinars that are best suited for you. So I'm grateful in advance if you could do that for us. And I guess my final question, it's really your chance to sum up on the panel. And you've touched on this a bit, I think, in your answers. But for the audience, bearing in mind they're primarily civil servants and public servants on the audience, when it comes to kind of the procurement of technology solutions in the public sector, from your personal experiences, what would you say is kind of the one mistake that you think civil servants or public servants tend to make? Elodie, you maybe have touched on this, I think, in your presentation, but what's the one mistake that you would leave them with if you were to advise them to avoid doing something? I'm going to come to you, Elodie, first, because I think you can build on what you said already.
I will say, think about the legacy problems that you're leaving for the next self. So for the next wave of civil servants, when they look back at what you've adopted, technologically speaking, how will they feel about it so that you build the best foundations for them in the future? Thanks. That would be my advice.
Very succinct. Thank you so much. Christina, you're nodding there. You've worked with so many different civil servants in different countries. What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, I would say, to sum up, that government leaders need to keep this good balance between strategic objectives and then maybe these solutions that are more commoditized. So the type of solutions that they have already gone through and maybe can be more replicable. So whenever a project implies like large transformation, the strategic objectives need to be very clear, need to be discussed. Sometimes there needs to be even co-creation, innovation, creativity with in the procurement process. Because if the process becomes too boxed in a tech buying framework, it could then not fulfill the objectives. So this is the first recommendation, I would say, like keeping this very good balance between what is already down the path and it's already like mature to be in a tech buying framework, and what is still in an early stage of innovation, creativity, and then needs to be more flexible. And then the second recommendation linked to the previous discussion we had is that tech frameworks need to be inclusive for large and smaller enterprises and SMEs. So if the frameworks are too complex or have these high barriers of entry, it's like difficult to be inclusive, and then governments might lose the opportunity to work in this wider ecosystem of partners that can enrich and can give also this agility to project into the future. So this would be like my two key recommendations and takeaways.
Thank you. Rotem, I'm sure you all agree with Christina on the inclusivity point. What would your kind of one key message for public servants be?
Think and plan big and act small. There are always something small that you can buy that will take you to the next level in the project. Don't think waterfall and big project. I like Elodie said, the agility way. Do it agile. This is my message.
I like that. Think big and act small. I really like that. Sal, we started with you. I'm going to come to you to give us your last thoughts. Your day job is advising civil servants. What would your one piece of advice be to them?
Yeah, so over the 20 years or so, I've been doing this kind of thing. The one common mistake that I see is for buyers to solutioneer. So avoid solutioneering. Let the market decide how best to fulfill your output-based requirement, because you could inadvertently gold plate, inadvertently cause issues that you're actually constraining the market's innovation. So I think don't solutioneer. The other thing is, it's not just about the procurement. If you're trying to resolve things during or after a procurement, it's too late. It's pre-procurement, it's pre-market engagement. I think a lot of civil servants I've come across seem to have a small fear about pre-market engagement. Regulatory environments, they allow pre-market engagement as long as it's planned and done properly within the regulations. Pre-market engagement is a place to find solutions.
Fantastic, thank you. Some really, really great practical advice there for our audience. So it just leaves me to say a huge thank you to our fantastic panel today. So to Sal, to Christina, to Elodie, and to Rotem, thank you so much for giving up all of your time, for sharing your expertise with us. There will be a link of this webinar circulated to everybody who registered. So if you weren't able to watch it all today, or you want to share it with your colleagues, you will be able to do that. And we will also be sending around a link with an article that covers the key issues that came out of this discussion in a week or so, which you can share with your networks as well. Thank you again to IBM for being our knowledge partner today. I hope you've all enjoyed the discussion as much as I have, and hopefully we will see you on another one of our webinars very shortly. So wherever you are, enjoy the rest of the day and see you again soon. Thank you so much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.